On June 6, 2013, groundbreaking revelations were made to the world and everyone was shocked. The man behind these leaks was Edward Snowden, a 29-year-old contractor and systems administrator working for the National Security Agency. The surveillance of the American people without their knowledge or consent was a rights violation. Edward Snowden took responsibility by upholding the Fourth Amendment by exposing the government violations, which led to court cases challenging the government's right to mass surveillance. There were many factors that contributed to Edward Snowden fighting for the right to privacy under the Fourth Amendment. One main factor was the Patriot Act that passed post 9/11, which allowed for communications monitoring of any citizen suspected of being in contact with a terrorist. On that day, 2,977 people were killed from a terrorist attack on the Twin Towers at the World Trade Center. Immediately after, President George W. Bush signed the Patriot Act to be able to help defend our country from any other terrorist attacks on citizens of the United States. Before the Patriot Act, courts could permit law enforcement to conduct electronic surveillance to investigate many ordinary, non-terrorism crimes. The act enabled investigators to gather information when looking into a full range of terrorism-related crimes. Different U.S. intelligence agencies misinterpreted this as having the authority to freely investigate anyone with the slightest suspicion of being involved with a terrorist. Another influential factor was the Patriot Act allowing for federal agencies to gain more information through subpoenaing an internet service provider or a cell service company such as Verizon or AT&T. The Fourth Amendment has been evaded in recent years by the government purchasing mass amounts of data from data broker companies instead of using a warrant to gain access to the data of certain individuals. Another thing about the Patriot Act was that it expanded the information that agencies can obtain through subpoenas, which is stated in Section 210 of the Act. Information, in this case, meant things such as call records, IMSI numbers, IP addresses, and many other types of sensitive information. This cause is important because of the unnecessary data about US citizens that could be extracted using a subpoena. Edward Snowden was fighting for privacy rights protected under the Fourth Amendment. The US intelligence agencies decided to conduct unwarranted mass surveillance without the permission of a warrant given by a federal judge. This was due to a large suspicion seeded by the government which particularly targeted Middle Eastern immigrants. This is because the 9/11 attacks were caused by a Middle Eastern extremist group called Al-Qaeda and also led to a rise in Islamophobia across the US. While Snowden was an employee at the NSA, he had access to a seemingly infinite amount of information on billions of people around the world, all of which were unaware of this invasion of privacy. This information included a lot of personal information that is otherwise illegal to access. I had practically unlimited access to the communications of nearly every man, woman, and child on Earth. Among those people were about 320 million of my fellow American citizens, who are being surveilled in gross contravention of not just the Constitution of the United States, but basic values of any free society. This rights violation is important because collecting mass amounts of sensitive information without a warrant is illegal and unconstitutional under the Fourth Amendment due to not having the authorization that a warrant provides.
Is that now all of our data can be collected without any suspicion of wrongdoing on our part, without any underlying justification. All of your private records, all of your private communications, all of your transactions, all of your associations, who you talk to, who you love, what you buy, what you read, all of these things can be seized.
Snowden took on the responsibility of fighting for privacy rights by taking sensitive documents from his workplace at the NSA. Officially known as the Kunian Regional SIGINT Operations Center, the tunnel is a 250,000 square foot building that is mostly underground and highly secure. During his work shifts, Snowden would copy large amounts of data to SD cards in order to transport them to his house. He would place the card inside a Rubik's Cube and breeze by the heavy security that guards the building. This was important because if he didn't get physical evidence of the NSA's actions, he could not properly expose them without being questioned about the authenticity of the documents. Snowden was able to access such a massive array of documents because of his program called Heartbeat. Heartbeat was a web crawler which lurked on the NSA's internet, scanning for all types of files. It would then create a breadboard, a bulletin board of those documents and other news for agents to read. The program tailored to the agents' interests, clearance level, and offices that they were affiliated with. The creation of Heartbeat allowed for Snowden to look for documents from different servers owned by the NSA or other intelligence agencies without raising suspicion. Due to his leaking of sensitive government documents, Snowden soon left the United States to avoid arrest. On May 23rd, he took an emergency medical leave, citing his epilepsy as a reason. He bought a plane ticket to Tokyo, and from there paid in cash for a flight to Hong Kong. It was here where he leaked all of the sensitive documents. Snowden felt that it was his responsibility to alert the public of the government's abuses. He gave interviews to The Guardian, an independent news outlet, about the documents while revealing his identity. This is something that is uncommonly found in whistleblowers, as they usually stay anonymous. While Snowden was living and hiding inside of his hotel room, the United States government sent a formal request to the government of Hong Kong requesting Snowden's extradition. However, they did not comply and declined. The US is disappointed and disagrees with the determination by Hong Kong authorities not to honor the US request for the arrest of the fugitive Edward J. Snowden. Snowden started to feel insecure about staying in Hong Kong as the US government had the potential to extradite him at any time. At this point, Snowden and his allies started applying for asylum in many countries. However, most of them denied, citing their responsibility to maintain diplomatic relations with the US government, despite their private sympathies. After multiple days of this repeating cycle, he was granted political asylum in Ecuador, a South American country with no extradition treaty to the US. However, an issue arose. There were no direct flights from Hong Kong to Quito, so an international layover would be necessary. A crucial part of this was avoiding any countries who are members of the North Atlantic Treaty Association, as they would extradite him to the US as part of their previous agreements. The only way to make the escape was by flying over Russia and sitting through a 23-hour layover. Time was of the essence, and Snowden took the risk. However, the US government had other plans for him and revoked his passport while he was on the plane. When Snowden arrived at Sheremetyevo Airport in Moscow, he and his legal advisor Sarah Harrison were quickly taken aside by guards and led to a room with a man in formal uniform. The man informed them that Snowden's passport had been revoked by the United States, trapping him in Russia. As a result, Snowden was now stuck in Russia with no way out, and he remains there to this day. Snowden's leaks resulted in many short-term changes, such as the discovery of other countries' surveillance programs, like one operated by the French government. Only a few days after French President François Hollande told the US to discontinue their surveillance program on France and its citizens, French newspaper Le Monde reported on a surveillance program operated by their own government which spied on their citizens as well. This showed us that Snowden's review of the documents prompted others to discover flaws in their own government systems. Another short-term effect of Snowden's whistleblowing is the sudden change in public opinion on government surveillance, with 52% of Americans expressing worry about surveillance programs.
If the concern was that somehow this was the only way to get this information out to the public, I signed an executive order well before Mr. Snowden leaked this information that provided whistleblower protection to the intelligence community for the first time. So there were other avenues available for somebody whose conscience was stirred and thought that they needed to question government actions.
While the government's greater concern was about public safety, many felt that this method could have been conducted differently without the violation of certain privacy rights. Snowden chose to take responsibility by bringing awareness to the Fourth Amendment rights violation by the American government. On June 11, 2013, the American Civil Liberties Union filed a lawsuit against then-director of the NSA, James Clapper, arguing that the program was unconstitutional and violated the rights of American citizens. At the end of the trial, the jury ruled against Clapper, resulting in the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court discontinuing the government's surveillance programs, ruling them as illegal. The government would have to review other bulk collection programs that are used under different administrations, such as the Drug Enforcement Administration, which also had its own bulk collection program up until 2013. Snowden states that he does wish to come back to the United States under the guarantee that his rights remain protected under the Constitution. This includes the right to a fair and speedy trial, along with the right to justify his actions. However, the government has stated multiple times that he will not be allowed to justify why he released the documents to the public eye, and that his verdict will depend solely on whether he released them or not. In conclusion, Edward Snowden felt personally responsible to review the violations of privacy rights by the United States government. Its impacts are still felt today. The actions of the NSA and other US government agencies were ruled illegal and unconstitutional, and a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Snowden left a lasting legacy for whistleblowers everywhere, showing them that the law can also be wrong at times. While there is no way of knowing if the NSA has truly ceased from performing such actions, people have started using safer communication methods that are much harder to intercept and protect free speech.